Next, the man in the red suit didn't even glance up. His gloved hand waved dismissively as Marcus Hill stood in front of him, small, awkward, and frozen in place. The line of children, buzzing just seconds earlier, fell into a nervous hush. Parents shifted uncomfortably. A few kids laughed short, clipped giggles that they immediately tried to smother. Marcus stood still, unsure if he had misheard. But the Santa, this towering, jolly figure who had just minutes ago laughed heartily for the little girl before him, had skipped him. Just skipped. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The Santa didn't look at him. "Next, please," he repeated louder, this time smiling widely at the blond boy behind Marcus, who stepped forward uncertainly, casting a confused look back. That was it. Just a single flick of the wrist, a subtle shift of attention, and Marcus was invisible. The adults nearby, chaperones, teachers, even a few school board members, exchanged brief glances. No one said a word. Someone coughed. A mom nervously snapped a picture of her daughter hugging Santa, as if to smooth over the awkward pause with a flash of normalcy. The music, Jingle Bell Rock, kept playing cheerfully through the speakers overhead. Marcus turned slowly, his cheeks burning, his hands clenched into fists in his coat pockets. He walked past the line of kids, avoiding their eyes. One boy whispered something and laughed, and another girl nudged him sharply. "Shut up," she hissed. But the damage was done. He kept walking, past the edge of the gymnasium where twinkling lights were strung haphazardly around fake candy canes, past the PTA cookie table, past a volunteer dressed as an elf who smiled too hard and then looked away as Marcus passed. He stepped into the hallway, where the overhead fluorescent lights felt cold and honest. He sat down by the vending machine and stared at the floor. His throat hurt, but he hadn't cried. Not yet. Marcus was used to being overlooked. Used to teachers forgetting to call on him, used to never being chosen first or second for group projects. He wasn't disruptive, didn't complain, didn't push. He just did what he was supposed to do and got by. His mom told him often, "You just be good, baby. That's all you can control. You be good and people will see." But what if they didn't? What if they never did? What if being good just made it easier to be ignored? He heard footsteps approaching. He wiped his nose quickly with his sleeve and sat up straighter. Daniel Carter, the janitor, stopped a few feet away. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, a mop in one hand, keys jingling on a loop clipped to his belt. He looked at Marcus the way only people who had lived long enough to understand real pain could look at someone, quietly, fully, and without pity. "You all right?" he asked finally. Marcus nodded, but Daniel didn't move. "You sure?" Marcus hesitated. "Yeah, I just needed some air." Daniel leaned the mop against the wall and sat down beside him on the floor, slow and deliberate. His knees cracked as he bent. "Wasn't right what happened in there," he said. His voice was low, deep, almost a whisper. Marcus looked down at his shoes. "It's okay." "No, it's not." Silence. After a long moment, Daniel asked, "What were you going to ask him for?" Marcus blinked. "Huh. Santa. What were you going to ask him for?" Marcus shrugged. He thought about lying, saying something about a video game or a bike. But for some reason, the question, so simple and quiet, made him want to tell the truth. "I was going to ask for a coat," he said. Daniel looked over. "For your mom," he added. "She's always cold in the mornings. And the one she has now, the zipper broke. She just ties it shut with a scarf." Daniel didn't respond right away. He just nodded. "That's a good ask," he said eventually. "Better than most I hear." They sat in silence for a while. The muffled sounds of the event drifted from the gym. Laughter, music, a kid crying, a loud cheer from somewhere near the crafts table. Then Marcus asked, "Do you think he did it on purpose?" Daniel didn't answer right away. When he did, he spoke slowly. "I think some people see what they want to see, and some people don't see at all. And some," he paused, "some go out of their way not to see." Marcus nodded. He knew that feeling. He lived it every day. Later that evening, Denise Hill knocked on the principal's office door, her expression tight and composed. She had just finished a double shift and had come straight from the hospital, still wearing her scrubs under a too-thin jacket. Her hair was pulled back, and her face showed the weariness of someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks. Principal Herrera opened the door and gestured for her to come in. She sat, clutching her purse in her lap. "I just want to understand what happened," Denise said calmly. "My son said he didn't get to speak to Santa, that he was skipped." Principal Herrera sighed, already defensive. "Ms. Hill, I understand your concern. I truly do. We've had a lot of kids today. Things got hectic. I'm sure there was no ill intent." Denise's eyes sharpened. "He was the only one skipped." "Well, I wasn't personally at that station the entire time, but I'm sure." Denise cut in, still calm. "Did anyone apologize to him?" "We're addressing the matter internally," the principal said. "We want to avoid causing unnecessary drama." Denise stood. Her voice was still level. "The drama already happened. You just want to avoid responsibility." And with that, she left. No yelling, no threats, just a quiet, searing kind of disappointment that lingered in the room like smoke. Meanwhile, Marcus was home, already asleep. He had tried to stay awake, but exhaustion from the day had overtaken him. In his dreams, Santa didn't speak at all. He just turned his head and became a wall. No eyes, no voice, just silence. Daniel, on the other hand, stood in the supply closet behind the gymnasium, holding a small package wrapped in old newspaper. Inside were items he'd picked out earlier that afternoon after his shift. A sturdy winter coat, deep blue, lined with fleece. A matching set of gloves and a thick gray scarf. He wrote a short note on a torn piece of cardboard from a cereal box. "For a warmer winter. No need to thank anyone." He didn't sign it. He taped the note to the coat, folded everything neatly into the package, and placed it into Marcus's locker before the sun came up the next morning. No one saw him do it. No cameras, no applause. Just quiet footsteps down the hallway and the sound of a locker door clicking shut. The next morning, Marcus arrived at school earlier than usual. His mother had left for her shift before the sun came up, and he'd taken the bus alone, as always. The sky outside was gray, snow clinging to the edges of the sidewalks in slushy piles. He walked the hallway with his usual quiet steps, nodding at the few kids and staff who were already in the building. No one said much to him. They rarely did. When he reached his locker and turned the dial on the combination lock, something was off. It didn't resist like it usually did. Clicked open too easily. Confused, he opened the metal door and stopped. There, neatly folded, was a thick, dark blue winter coat. Gloves, a scarf, and a knit cap sat on top. All of it looked new. Not flashy, not expensive, but clean and warm and exactly the kind of thing his mother would never buy for herself. His breath caught. He looked around the hallway, but it was still mostly empty. No one stood nearby. No notes from teachers. No sign that anyone had seen. And then he saw it, the cardboard scrap. Just a rectangle torn from a cereal box with handwriting in bold black marker. "For a warmer winter. No need to thank anyone." He reached out slowly, as if touching the items would make them disappear. The fabric was soft but thick. Real warmth. He pressed the coat to his chest and closed the locker quickly, as if to protect it. His eyes stung a little, but he blinked fast and took a deep breath. Who? Why? He wasn't sure if he was supposed to tell anyone. He didn't want to ruin whatever magic had made this happen. So he stayed quiet. That morning, when he got home, his mother was standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the small frosted window while a pot of soup simmered behind her. He handed her the package wordlessly. She looked at him, confused, then unwrapped it slowly. When she saw what was inside, her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She ran her fingers along the coat sleeves, then lifted the scarf, blinking in disbelief. "Marcus, where did this come from?" "I found it in my locker," he said. "Did someone say anything?" He shook his head. Denise sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the items. After a long pause, She reached out and placed a hand gently on her son's cheek. "You told someone about the coat, didn't you?" "Just one person," he said. "The janitor, Mr. Daniel." She sat back, brows furrowed. "Daniel Carter? You know him?" Denise didn't answer. She stood up and walked to the hallway closet, pulling out her old broken zipper coat. She hung it carefully next to the new one, her movements slow. That night, when she left for work, she wore the new coat. Marcus watched her through the window as she walked to the bus stop, her back straighter than usual. She looked warm. The next few days passed quietly. The school never mentioned the Santa incident again. No teachers brought it up. The gym was back to its usual echoing emptiness, and the decorations had already been packed away into storage. But something in Marcus had shifted. During math class, when Mrs. Langston asked a question, he raised his hand. Not loudly, not quickly, but clearly. And when she nodded to him, he answered, rightly. A few students looked over, surprised. Marcus didn't shrink back into his chair afterward. He just sat there, straight, focused. He began noticing things he hadn't before. A girl in his homeroom, Rosa, always stayed behind after class to erase the boards without being asked. A boy named Evan never had a lunch and just pretended to not be hungry. The special education aide, Ms. Kim, always brought an extra thermos of soup in the winter, which she never drank. In the quiet of being overlooked, you notice who else is unseen. One afternoon, Marcus stayed behind after science class and walked out to the maintenance hallway near the back of the building, where Daniel Carter's small office sat behind a door marked storage. The man was at his workbench, fixing a broken desk leg with calm precision. Marcus stood in the doorway until Daniel looked up. "Hey there," Daniel said, setting the screwdriver down. "Need something?" Marcus stepped forward, his voice low. "I wanted to say thank you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "You know what." Daniel wiped his hands on a rag. "I really don't." Marcus smiled, just barely. "It was you. The coat. The gloves. I didn't tell anyone. But thank you." Daniel met his eyes for a moment and then nodded slowly. "You're welcome." There was silence for a beat before Daniel spoke again. "You know," he said, returning to the desk leg, "I used to go here. Long time ago." Marcus's eyes widened. "You did?" "Yep." This place looked a lot different back then. Same gym, though. Same cold hallways. "I was about your age." Marcus stepped closer. "Did you like it here?" Daniel paused. "Not really," he said. "I had a rough time. Didn't have a lot. Teachers didn't really notice me. Some didn't want to. And something happened once. Kind of like what happened to you." Marcus's chest tightened. "With Santa. Something like that. I was the only black kid in my class. There was a field trip to a museum. Everyone got handed a lunch bag with their name on it when we got on the bus. Mine was accidentally missing. Teacher said it must have been a mix-up, that I probably forgot it. But I hadn't. My grandma packed it for me, wrote my name in big letters. I saw it on the counter that morning. I knew it was there. What happened? I didn't eat. Sat on the bench while the others had their lunch. One of the moms handed me half her sandwich like she was feeding a stray dog. Marcus didn't know what to say. Daniel continued, "I never forgot that day. Not because of the sandwich, but because no one said anything. Not the teachers. Not the kids. Not even my grandma when I told her. It just disappeared. Like I was supposed to swallow the silence with the hunger." He looked up. "I guess I stayed here because I figured maybe one day I'd see a kid like me, and I'd be the one to say something. Or do something." Marcus nodded. "I'm glad you did." Daniel smiled. "Me too." Over the next few weeks, Marcus began to change. Not into someone different, but into more of himself. He spoke a little louder in class. He sat with Rosa and Evan at lunch. He offered to help Miss Kim carry her soup thermos when she looked tired. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was simply seeing more. But the silence around the Santa incident wasn't universal. Whispers began to circle among a few of the older students. One 8th grader, whose younger sister had been near the front of the line that day, started talking. Others chimed in. A few parents asked questions on the school's Facebook group. The principal issued a short, vague statement about staffing issues and event challenges. But the damage had already been done. Some parents wanted names. Some wanted apologies. Most just wanted it to be over. Marcus stayed quiet. He hadn't told anyone what happened in full. Not even Rosa or Evan. But his silence wasn't fear anymore, it was choice. He knew the truth. So did Daniel. That was enough. Or at least it was, until he walked into the gym one afternoon for PE and saw the substitute Santa, the man from the event, talking to Coach Branley near the bleachers. The same man who had skipped him like he was nothing. Marcus froze. The man looked over. Their eyes met. There was no flicker of recognition. Or maybe there was, and the man simply chose not to show it. Coach Branley slapped the man on the back and laughed about something. The man chuckled. Marcus turned and walked out of the gym without a word. That night, he sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a sheet of paper. He started writing, not for attention, not for revenge, but because silence, left too long, becomes a weight. He signed the letter, a student at Jefferson Middle who's tired of being invisible. He didn't use his name, and when he was done, he folded it and slid it into the slot of the suggestion box outside the principal's office. 1 week later, the letter appeared word for word on the local paper's online community page, posted anonymously. The letter spread faster than anyone expected. It began quietly, a share on a local mom's Facebook group, a few retweets, then an unexpected comment from a former student who remembered similar incidents, years ago, brushed under the rug. Within 2 days, the anonymous post had reached the inbox of a reporter at the Cleveland Herald, and by the end of the week, there was an article titled, "A Student Writes, Tired of Being Invisible, Allegations of Discrimination at Jefferson Middle School Surface After Holiday Incident." The story didn't name Marcus. It didn't have to. Enough people had been there, had seen the subtle cruelty, had felt the silence settle into their own stomachs that day. For those who had laughed or turned away, guilt began to whisper. For those who had spoken up, vindication arrived. But for the school administration, especially Principal Herrera, the fallout began quietly and grew steadily worse. A small protest formed outside the school entrance. Nothing dramatic, just a dozen parents holding signs one morning. "Every child matters. We see you, Marcus. Whoever you are. Silence is complicity." The school board issued a statement calling the incident regrettable, but warned the community about jumping to conclusions. But the real shift happened in the teacher's lounge, in the janitor's office, in the hallways. Whispers, questions, regret. Meanwhile, Marcus tried to live as if everything were normal. He hadn't told his mom he wrote the letter. She'd read the article twice at the kitchen table and didn't say a word, just ran her fingers over the screen with a quiet intensity. At school, Rosa sat beside him in English class and passed him a folded note. "Was it you?" He didn't answer, but she smiled anyway. "It was brave," she whispered later. "Whoever wrote it." But the truth was, Marcus wasn't trying to be brave. He just couldn't carry the weight anymore. On a Thursday afternoon, as the snow came down hard against the windows and the school buzzed with the promise of winter break, Marcus was called to the office. The hallway seemed longer than usual as he walked, the sound of his sneakers on the floor echoing louder in his ears. He opened the office door, expecting Principal Herrera. Instead, he found a man in a blazer, unfamiliar but not unfriendly, and beside him, Daniel Carter. Marcus's eyes widened. Daniel gave him a slight nod, calm but serious. The man in the blazer introduced himself as Mr. Stanford, from the district's Department of Equity and Inclusion. He gestured for Marcus to sit. "I know this might be uncomfortable," Mr. Stanford began, "but we wanted to speak with you privately. You are not in trouble. I want that to be clear." Marcus sat down slowly, unsure where to look. Mr. Stanford continued, "A letter was shared with us. Anonymous, but very specific. We have reason to believe you may have written it." Daniel sat still, his hands folded on the table. He didn't speak, but his presence alone made Marcus feel like the room wasn't entirely hostile. "We're not here to accuse you," Stanford said gently. We're here to listen. If you want to speak. If not, that's your right. Marcus looked down at his hands. He thought about lying, staying silent, pretending he didn't know. But he also remembered that day, how it felt when that gloved hand waved him away like nothing. He remembered Daniel sitting next to him, asking the only question that mattered. What were you going to ask for? And he thought of his mom walking to the bus in the new coat. He looked up. I wrote it. The room was quiet. Mr. Stanford nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. Would you mind telling us why? Marcus swallowed hard. Because no one did anything. No one said anything. It was like it didn't happen. But it did. And I didn't want to be invisible anymore. Mr. Stanford nodded again, this time with something more in his eyes. Understanding. We believe you, he said. There will be an investigation. Things will change. And for what it's worth, that letter was one of the most powerful things I've read in a long time. When Marcus left the office, Daniel followed him out into the hallway. They walked side by side in silence until they reached the back corridor near the supply room. You didn't have to come in with me, Marcus said. Daniel looked down the hallway, then back at him. I wanted to. Then, after a pause, you were braver than I ever was at your age. You still helped me, Marcus said, even if no one else did. Daniel nodded slowly. I know what it feels like to be erased, to walk through a place every day and feel like a shadow. That coat, that wasn't charity. That was acknowledgement. For the first time, Daniel leaned against the wall and seemed to let something go. His face softened in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. You know, I used to have a photo of my 5th grade class. I kept it for years. I was in the back row off to the side. You could barely see my face. One day I just threw it away. Told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. Marcus stood quiet, absorbing every word. Do you still have any pictures? He asked. Daniel smiled faintly. Just memories. Some loud. Most quiet. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a notebook. He flipped to a page with a sketch he'd done. Something he'd never shown anyone. It was of the school hallway, and in the center, a figure stood sweeping, head bowed, keys at his hip. Every line was careful, detailed, respectful. This is you, Marcus said. Daniel took the drawing and stared at it for a long time. His eyes shimmered, but he didn't blink them away. You saw me, he said. Yeah, Marcus replied. Because you saw me first. That weekend, the school board made a quiet decision. The Santa hired for the event was permanently banned from district functions. No press release, just a silent removal. But people noticed. More importantly, teachers began asking new questions in classrooms. An assembly was organized not as a forced apology, but as a way to talk about what had happened and what needed to change. And at the center of it, though he never stepped on stage, was a boy who had once been skipped in line, and a janitor who had once been a boy himself. A few days before Christmas break, Marcus came home to find his mother sitting on the couch, holding a weathered envelope. Inside were 2 old photographs. One showed a group of 5th grade students. The second was of a teenage boy mopping a cafeteria floor, face caught mid-laugh, eyes bright. On the back was scrawled in faded pen, Daniel Carter, 1983. First job. Not just cleaning, watching. Denise looked at her son, eyes full of something ancient and personal. He gave me this today, she said. He told me you reminded him of someone. Marcus sat beside her, holding the photo carefully. He's the reason I didn't disappear, he said. You never would have disappeared, she whispered, pulling him into her arms. Not to me. Snow was falling again outside. The world looked soft, blanketed, quiet. But inside their small apartment, something was alive. Not loud, not shiny, not wrapped in ribbons, but real. A boy who wrote a letter. A man who never forgot. 2 invisible lives that found each other. And in that connection, the kind of light that doesn't flicker with applause, but glows steady in the places no spotlight ever reaches. The snow didn't stop that winter. Cleveland was wrapped in layer after layer of silence, soft and white. The streets were slower, people quieter, and yet, something under the surface felt like it was moving, growing. At Jefferson Middle School, the change was less dramatic than the headlines and far more important. It started in the staff lounge, where teachers, for once, began to talk to the janitorial staff not just with politeness, but with interest. It spread to classrooms, where teachers hesitated before assuming who the troublemakers were, or where the brightest ideas would come from. And it showed up in the smallest things. The way kids looked at each other in the hall, the way the word invisible had become something nobody wanted to be responsible for. But for Marcus Hill, change didn't feel like a loud celebration. It felt like a quiet shift in gravity. People started calling him by name more. A teacher he'd never spoken to before complimented his drawing in the hallway. Rosa invited him to her cousin's birthday party without whispering, without looking around first. Coach Branley nodded at him in the gym and, for once, didn't look through him. Still, there was a weight Marcus carried, the knowledge that nothing that had changed was permanent, that people forget, that apologies fade, and that someone somewhere would always be watching for weakness, for difference, for a moment to look away. One afternoon, while helping Daniel clean up after lunch, something Marcus had started doing almost without thinking, he found an old cardboard box in the storage room. "What's in there?" he asked. Daniel, who was fixing a broken chair nearby, looked over. "Memories," he said. "Or maybe junk, depending who you ask." Marcus opened it. Inside were stacks of faded papers, old flyers from long-past events, a Jefferson Middle School yearbook from 1982, and under all that, a yellowed binder labeled Equity Task Force, 1990. He pulled it out. Inside were meeting notes, typed and handwritten, from a short-lived committee that had once tried to address racism in the district. "What happened to them?" Marcus asked. Daniel didn't look up. "They tried. Some folks listened. Most didn't. Eventually, people got tired or scared or promoted. Nothing stuck." Marcus flipped through the pages. The handwriting changed from neat to angry to discouraged. The last page was dated 1993. It ended with a note scribbled in pencil. "We'll try again someday." Marcus stared at it for a long time. That night, at home, he pulled out his notebook and wrote just 4 words at the top of a new page. "We're trying again now." Over the winter break, Denise began coming home from work a little earlier, not because her shifts were shorter, but because she stopped taking doubles every time they were offered. "You don't need to kill yourself to keep us okay," Marcus told her one night while setting the table. "We're already okay." She smiled at him like he was older than she remembered. "You're starting to sound like your grandma," she said. "She used to say that too." Was she right? She usually was. Denise started leaving small notes in Marcus's lunch again, like she did when he was younger. "I see you. You're enough. Proud doesn't even cover it." Marcus kept every single one. One day in early January, Daniel wasn't at school. Nor the next day, or the day after that. When Marcus asked, the office said he was on medical leave. No details, no timeline, just a silence that felt familiar in the worst way. First, Marcus waited. Maybe Daniel had a cold. Maybe it was the flu. Maybe it was nothing. But a week later, Marcus found a letter in his locker, folded with the same kind of care as the coat had been. No envelope, just folded paper. It read, "Hey kid, if you're reading this, it means I had to go take care of something. Nothing scary, just life reminding me I'm not 20 anymore. I want you to know something, what you did matters. What you keep doing will matter even more. There are kids watching you now just like you were watching me. Keep walking even when the hallway's empty. And don't let them make you forget who you are. I'll see you again soon. D." Marcus read it twice, then 3 more times. His hands shook a little, but he didn't cry. He took the letter home and placed it in the same notebook where he kept his drawings and his mother's lunch notes. That night, he drew a new picture. It was of a hallway, long, empty, lit with sunlight from the windows, and a figure walking alone at the end of it, head high, carrying a bag in one hand. The janitor. But this time, Marcus added something he never had before: footsteps behind him. Small ones. Following. Not out of fear, but because someone was leading the way. Back at school, rumors began to spread. Someone said Daniel had cancer. Another said he'd been let go for causing drama. Though nobody believed that. Some thought he had simply retired. Marcus didn't speak. He waited. He hoped. And while he waited, he began to build something. It started as a proposal for an art project. A mural painted by students that would go on the east wall of the cafeteria. "We wanted to show what it means to be seen," he wrote. "Not just pictured, but known." The art teacher, Mrs. Tran, helped him submit it. The principal approved it faster than anyone expected. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of real support, maybe both. But it was approved. Over the next weeks, a small group of students joined Marcus, Rosa, Evan, a seventh grader named Sam who barely spoke but drew with incredible detail. They sketched, painted, argued over colors and figures. Slowly, the wall transformed from blank beige to a vivid scene of hands, eyes, people of all shades and shapes and sizes. Not posed, not perfect, just real. In the center of the mural, almost hidden in the background, was a man with keys at his belt, holding a mop like a walking stick. Marcus never told anyone, but he added a tiny note in the paint, barely visible to the naked eye, near the man's left shoe. "We remember." The mural was unveiled during a school assembly. Cameras flashed, speeches were made, and parents clapped politely. But for Marcus, none of that mattered. What mattered was the silence between moments, the pause when the curtain dropped, and the room went quiet, and eyes scanned the wall, and a few faces changed. What mattered was when Mrs. Langston stood up afterward and, with tears in her eyes, said, "I'm sorry we didn't see you sooner." Not just to Marcus, but to more than one kid in that room. The mural made the news, though not the front page. Just a corner piece under local highlights. The article quoted a student anonymously. "Sometimes all it takes is one person who doesn't look away." Marcus cut it out and taped it inside his locker. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if Daniel would come back. But he knew what he would do: keep going, keep seeing, keep speaking. One afternoon, as he walked home, the snow began to fall again. Soft, steady, the kind of snow that doesn't sting or melt too fast. He stopped at a small shop near the bus stop and looked in the window. Inside was a display of winter coats. One of them looked almost exactly like the one Daniel had given him, only smaller. He stared at it for a moment, then looked down the street, toward home. And then, without meaning to, he smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because he had helped start something. Something that couldn't be put back into a box or buried in a closet. A quiet kind of revolution. The kind that starts with being skipped in line and ends with being remembered. Spring arrived slowly in Cleveland, peeling away the heavy coats and the silence that had clung to the streets for months. The snow melted into the cracks of sidewalks. Tulips began to push through the soil outside the school entrance. And the hallways of Jefferson Middle were filled again with the uneven rhythms of kids who believed, if only a little, that things could be different. Marcus had grown, not taller, not louder, but more certain. He moved through the school with purpose, with calm, and with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer questioned if he belonged. He still carried his sketchbook, still walked home most days, still held his mother's hand at the bus stop when she was tired. But inside, something had rooted. Something unshakable. One warm afternoon, just a few weeks before the end of the school year, Marcus walked past the cafeteria mural and stopped. It had become part of the building now. Students passed it without hesitation. Teachers pointed it out to visitors. And once a reporter from the district office took a photo for a new campaign titled, "Seen, Heard, Respected." No one knew it had started with a coat. No one except those who mattered. Marcus leaned against the wall across from the mural, arms folded, watching the students in line for lunch. He smiled when he saw Rosa show her sketchbook to Sam, who nodded in his usual silent way. And then he saw him, walking down the hallway, slower than usual, wearing his old work boots and a gray cap pulled low over his brow, Daniel Carter. Marcus's heart kicked hard. He stood up straight, unsure whether to run to him or freeze in place. Daniel spotted him, smiled, and opened his arms just a little. "Hey, kid. You're back," Marcus breathed. "For a little while," Daniel said. "They finally got tired of my replacement messing up the supply room." They stood facing each other in the hallway, the sounds of lunch and laughter echoing around them, but in that moment it was quiet. "Still, you okay?" Marcus asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "I will be. I missed you." "I missed you too." Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out his sketchbook, flipping to the last page. It was a new drawing, one he'd started but never finished. It was of Daniel, not with a mop or in a hallway, but sitting at a desk reading a letter. On the desk, a small boy stood on a chair, looking over his shoulder, watching. "I wanted to show you this," Marcus said. Daniel looked at the page for a long time. Then he closed the book gently and handed it back. "You already did," he said. They didn't need to say more. Words were only part of the story. The rest lived in the spaces between gestures, in the silences they both understood better than anyone else. That night, at home, Denise and Marcus sat at the kitchen table, eating leftovers. The apartment window was open, letting in the first warm air of the year. "He's back," Marcus said. "Daniel." Denise smiled softly. "Good. Some people are too rare to lose twice." They ate in comfortable silence. Later, as Marcus got ready for bed, he noticed something new on the fridge, a magnet holding up an envelope with his name on it. He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, typed with the district's logo at the top. It read, "Dear Marcus Hill, we are pleased to inform you that your artwork and contribution to the Jefferson Middle School community have been selected for recognition at the annual Youth Voices celebration. Your story has inspired not just your school, but the entire district. We hope you will join us at the event, where your mural will be featured and your voice honored." Marcus stared at the words, then folded the letter slowly. He didn't feel proud exactly. He felt ready. On the day of the event, the auditorium was packed with families, teachers, and staff from all over the city. Speeches were made, awards were handed out, music played. When Marcus's name was called, he walked up the steps calmly. No nerves, just peace. He stood at the podium, looked out over the crowd, and saw Daniel standing at the back of the room. Near the door, arms crossed, a soft smile on his face. He didn't speak long, just a few words. "I used to feel invisible. Now I don't. Not because I got louder, but because someone looked closer. And I think that's something we can all do." The crowd clapped, but Marcus didn't stay for the spotlight. He walked off the stage and went straight to Daniel, who pulled him into a quiet hug that said everything neither of them had said in months. On the ride home, Marcus looked out the window, thinking of how things had changed. Not fast, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to know that sometimes, what starts with a skipped moment in a holiday line ends with a boy standing in front of hundreds. Not as a victim, but as a voice. A reminder. Later that evening, as the city lights flickered across the skyline, and the cold finally began to let go of the streets, Marcus sat by his bedroom window, writing again. But this time it wasn't a letter of protest. It was a thank you, not to Daniel, not to his mother, not even to the school, but to whoever might need to read it next. "You're not invisible," he wrote, "and even if they pretend not to see you, someone will. Keep going. Keep being you. You matter. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end."